So there's one rule that I've brought into my life that has completely changed how I look at both long-term commitments as well as short-term failures. It's totally reshaped how I look at success and how I make commitments going forward. It's called the 3-year rule, and I think it might help you as well. Most people don't follow through with their aspirations because they're afraid. They're afraid people will talk about them behind their back. They're afraid they'll look stupid. They're afraid of making decisions because God forbid they make the wrong one. So instead of taking action, what do? Nothing. We don't switch careers. We don't start that business. We keep the same haircut for more than a decade. I'm unfortunately speaking from experience. Inaction sets in because we're attempting to avoid the pain that comes with change. The discomfort it brings to leave our routines, to build new relationships, to go to that networking event. Again, speaking from experience. The very thought of failure has us back away from new challenges, and it prevents us from doing the things that we really want to do in life. But the truth is, how we look at failure can tell us everything we need to know about success. So what's the 3-year rule, and why is it so powerful? To answer that question, I need to introduce you to 2 Australian podcasters. This is Josh and Tommy, and more than anything else, they've mastered the art of failing.
What?
Early last year, they started a podcast called The Daily Talk Show. It was at a time when everyone said they were late to the party. People told them it would never work. They said creating a successful podcast in 2018 was impossible. And those critics were right.
I thought you said this was going to make us look good.
But that's because they didn't intend to create a successful podcast in 2018. They expected it would take much longer than that. They knew that to make something meaningful, it would take time, much more time than most people are willing to wait.
You need to give yourself the opportunity to succeed, and you need to realize that it's going to take longer than you think.
But this isn't the narrative that's shared across social media and on the front of magazines. We see the overnight success. The kid who started a multi-million-dollar company and dropped out of college. The handsome minimalist that got 2 million YouTube subscribers in less than 2 years. We usually see the success without the failures. Oh my God, why am I doing this to myself? That alone could be defeating, but when you combine it with our increasing need for instant gratification, you've got a real problem. When we have every fact in our phones, every restaurant only a few clicks away, when literally everything you will ever need can be shipped to your door, we start to build an expectation for things to happen quickly. We expect things to happen overnight, not over time, and many of us have failed to realize that success will only come through a combination of 2 things, patience and persistence. That's why last year, when I was on a FaceTime call with my friend Josh, we were talking about our businesses and the things that we were going through. I was surprised by something he said.
Tommy and I were talking, we're going to do the show for 5 years. That's the commitment.
Something about the way he said it made me think that he wouldn't even give up after 5 years.
We saw the value in creating a big, long-term goal. So then, even if things got really difficult, we could always look at it and say, on this massive timeline that we're working on, this little failure or this little thing to happen is actually not a big deal.
They've since doubled their 5-year commitment to 10 years. The number itself is arbitrary. I've heard people commit to 2, 5, 10 years. It doesn't really matter. But for simplicity's sake, let's just call it the 3-year rule. It's got a nice ring to it. And the 3-year rule is the opposite of instant gratification. It's what happens when you dedicate yourself to a project for the long run. When you measure your success over the course of the next 3 years instead of the next 3 weeks, you will no longer identify yourself based upon your short-term failures. What does it matter that no one showed up to your first art exhibit, or that your first 10 YouTube videos got 52 views? It also changes how you look at risks.
With this journey, we've looked at, okay, the 10 years means that this, if it's a financial risk, or if it's a personal time or a personal risk in terms of where we are, proximity.
It's temporary.
It's temporary, yeah. It's a part. It's going to make up a small percentage of the bigger game, and so then it makes the risk less risky.
The biggest risk that most people can take is following the status quo. The biggest risk is taking the job because it feels like the easy, simple thing to do, and getting 10 years on and realizing that's not the job that you want to take.
Think back to your own failures from 3, 4, even 5 years ago. Can you even remember any of them? When you put it into that perspective, it's hard to believe that we spend so much time worrying about messing up, about failing, about looking foolish in front of others. We almost always get a second chance. I met Josh in January of 2016. This is 2 months before I started this YouTube channel, 2 months before I was about to embark on my own journey of trying to make one of the most radical transitions of my life, moving from becoming a freelancer to an original content creator. And I can't tell you how much doubt I had, how risky it was at the time to put off all of my income, to turn down all of my clients and try to pursue something as unorthodox as becoming a full-time YouTuber. But I just knew deep down that if I didn't actually make that commitment, if I didn't just go for it, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Early on, I committed to 2 years. I told myself that I'd give this thing a solid effort, and if nothing happens over those 2 years, if I didn't see any kind of growth or any idea of where this was going, I'd reassess and potentially change paths. But until that time, I had no other option but to continue to push forward. Sure, I'd be willing to experiment, adjust direction, and do things differently when they weren't working, but my overall vision to try to become an original content creator was non-negotiable for 2 years, no matter how tempting other opportunities might become.
I think the default strategy is sit in a state of being available to opportunities, and that by not committing to something that's going to take up a bunch of time, you're somehow open to every opportunity. So you're winning the opportunity lottery. Whereas for us, what we've done is taken an opportunity and committed to it, but then had space to be able to move around. And that it almost becomes its own being.
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time moving away from commitment, but then actually embracing commitment. There's some freedom in that. So, you know, it's the routine that we create, it's the friendships that we are able to nurture, it's the, you know, being able to build a family and the team around us. Like, that has to have some level of commitment behind it.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes, for me, rules so powerful, is because we're not saying create 100 rules to live by, select a few that are really important. So I talked about the 2-day rule recently on this channel, which, Josh, you said you have your own 2-day rule?
Well, I thought before clicking on the thumbnail, I thought it was food can only be on the ground for a maximum of 2 days. 2 days.
Yeah. It's a very sustainable way to look at the 2-day rule.
Especially when you have the house that he does.
I believe it's a 10-second rule, but for the record. But like those two specifically have helped me so much, both from like a short-term perspective and the long-term approach of like focusing on really big goals. Success is never guaranteed, especially if you choose to do something as unconventional as start a podcast. But if you enjoy the process and you're happy creating for years without any expectation of success, you might have what it takes. When it comes to Josh and Tommy's 10-year rule, they've got a ways to go before their podcast can support the two of them.
Beg your pardon?
But over the last month, they've gotten more downloads than the past year, and that's an indicator that things are working. I mean, they've literally had a fan tattoo their podcast logo into their arm. And if that's not a sign of success, then I don't know what is. Whether it takes them 3, 5, or 10 years doesn't really matter. That's not the point. The point is that they're committed to do this for the long run.
Well, it's also the humbling experience of realising that you're not that great and there's probably people better than you, but if you can do it the longest, then you could still potentially win.
Staying power.
Yeah.
2 more things before I wrap this video up. 1, make sure you go subscribe to Josh and Tommy's YouTube channel. There's gonna be a link down in the description. It would mean a lot if we support these guys and help them get as far as they can in this 10-year period. I'm so proud of the work they've done, and I think you will find them to be hilarious, clever, and just very insightful guys. The second thing is, if you want the extended interview to my interview with Josh and Tommy, go to patreon.com/MattDevelop.
Fart in front of your partner now, because then you're not going to have to hold it in the future.
I can't stand by that advice.
Really?
Depends how early on it is. I mean, if it's first week,
I think
you're making a
within the
mistake.
first week, I think you're filtering out.
Big mistake.
My wife thought I didn't fart, but then when I opened that door, she really regretted it.
Literally, that door opened wide open. So in addition to that interview, you're gonna get 20 plus videos that I've already created, as well as my monthly secret AMA podcast where I answer questions exclusively from Patreon subscribers. So again, you can go to patreon.com/MattDevelop. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.